Hello everyone and welcome to another video. I'm actually really excited about this video. So we are doing our first direction of play video. The goal of this video is, for example, I'm going to go ahead and put up an example on this board. We are going to have a board position here, and I'm going to ask you guys, viewers, what you think is correct, so this would be, for example, like a good time to pause the video and be like, okay, I thought of C, I thought of D, I thought about B, and I thought about A, and I decided that I think this is correct. And basically, YouTube has this really cool feature where I can put quizzes on videos. Now, it is not perfect. It is not the exact way that I would like it to be. The way that I would like it to be is that it pops up on the screen and pauses the video a little bit. However, I guess that might not be everyone's cup of tea. So maybe in a way, YouTube has done this better. But basically, on this video, on the right of the screen, or maybe at the bottom of the screen, you should see something that says quiz and take quiz. I want you guys to follow along with the video and take that quiz as we go. So the goal is, when you get to one of those problems, or when you get to one of these questions like this, or board positions with the letters on them, you pause the video, you think about it, and you click what you think the answer is on your little quiz. And so you kind of play along with the quiz as we go. And my job is, I will, of course, pause for a moment to give you guys a moment to pause the video so I don't spoil the answer immediately. And then I will basically tell you guys the answer, explain why it's the answer, and kind of give you an idea of why the other ones are not the answer. Now, I do want to set some ground rules beforehand. Go has a lot of moves that sometimes are correct. And sometimes, just because they are correct does not always mean that they are the best. I think a good example for this, I'm going to quickly show you guys. To me, if I have something like this, I might tell you, let's say that we have A and B here. Something I might tell you is that B is correct, and I might tell you A is wrong. A is minus 0.1, while B is the actual blue move. When in reality, this might not mean much. Like, a lot of people might see 0.1 as not that big of a deal. Now, I would agree, normally 0.1 isn't that big of a deal. So in some of my questions, I might give you an answer that is 0.1, like minus 0.1, or tell you that this one's okay because it is 0.1. However, there are also problems where I might shift away from that idea, where I might go, even though this is 0.1, I would not suggest playing this despite that. So for as we have example on the screen, I would never recommend to people playing A here. I think A is incredibly bad despite it being only a 0.1 move. I think this move entices a lot of bad habits. I've probably already talked about this exact position a few times. Usually if you play low here, you're playing for territory, but we usually don't play this Joseki with the idea that we're trying to build territory. So we play more flexibly. We play for the idea that this is going to be an influential group. And so playing low just tells me that we often have very bad habits when we are playing this move. So to me, this would be completely incorrect. So in situations like these, I will mention, like, hey, this is a 0.1 result. It is acceptable, but you don't have to play this because it would be bad habit-wise, right? But take that for what you will. But we're gonna go ahead and get started. Now, every time I make these videos, my goal is gonna be to do 4 questions, and they're gonna be. Starting move is going to be on one side of the board. So four questions, 4 sides of the board, basically. Yeah, and let's go ahead and get started. So for the first question, we can see here we have A, B, and C, and D. So I'm going to go ahead and pause for 10 seconds and give you guys a moment to pause the video and think about what you would like to do. All right. And if you thought the answer was B, then you have gotten this one correct. B would be the best way to play here. Now, B doesn't mean that it's going to be the only way to play. Technically, you could play A. However, A is not what I would play. So this is going to be a perfect example of kind of what we just looked at. This is technically acceptable. However, this to me shows that I have bad habits. Not that I'm playing an entirely bad move, but I have a bad habit here. So one thing that we try to avoid as we get stronger is we call this one of the strongest corners in the whole game. Honestly, to me, it is the strongest corner in the whole game. But some may consider some other corners a lot stronger. But to me, this is the strongest corner. And when we add this stone over here, we are extending off of what we consider the strongest corner. Now, a lot of players might consider that very comfortable. A lot of people see themselves building territory off of their really thick, strong groups. However, that's technically not the most efficient way to play. And I know some people are going to make the argument of, but what if I want to play for territory? That's okay, but we should play for territory efficiently, not in a way where we are obtaining something that is slow, right? So basically, even though we are taking an extension off of our strength and taking territory, we would actually prefer it if we didn't have this move. We would prefer if this move didn't exist, because then when our opponent approaches, our group here can live independently of itself. It can live without the help of outside stones, and we can pincer that stone. We can pincer that one singular stone, where now if they want to live, they have to leap out. This would be something that would be considered bad for white. White would not want to approach here in the lower right, because it would be too good for black to be able to pincer this stone without having to worry about one group and only having to think about the other group. So white would prefer not to approach this, but black would also prefer not to take it immediately, because it's like saying, I can get this at any time anyway. So instead of taking an extension off of a strong living corner, that means it's a good opportunity to pincer. So anytime that you have strong living corners, you can go, okay, I don't want to take an extension off of this corner, because it's strong independently. I want my opponent to approach here. So when, my students and other viewers ask me, hey, Paige, when is a good time to pincer versus when is a good time to, to play the normal Joseki here, or the most common Joseki here, if you already have that extension, that is an amazing time to pincer. If your game plan is to go here and then approach the lower left, then you probably are choosing an incorrect Joseki, especially if you plan to take this extension back. So for example, a really common thing that can happen is, let's say we have this open position here, and we go into this idea that we intend to approach this lower left corner. While this isn't an inherently bad move, it can be a little slow or incorrect if we choose to just jump off and back off here. This would be very inefficient. Instead, we would prefer to play away, because we would like it if our opponent pincers us. We would like to have them, pincer here, for example, and we can go ahead and, squeeze it and press it down. So this would actually be very good for black. So when we're looking at this position and we're like, what do we do here? That would make the pincer move correct instead. So we now know why A is not bad, but it is the incorrect idea. So it would be slightly worse than if we had pincered. Now, B is correct because we have a lot of strength here. So something that we might be looking for as black is we might be really happy if white were to jump here. That would allow us to go into this pinwheel Joseki. Now, I know a lot of people aren't fond of the pinwheel Joseki. It is one of my ultimate favorite Josekis to play. But we're not talking about uncomfortableness here. We are talking about direction of play. So sure, you may not be comfortable to play this, but it would be the correct direction to play this. We are basically saying, hey, I've got my stone over here, but I also have my strength over here. So if white were to, make an attempt to go into what we might perceive as the normal direction here. Sorry, I accidentally attached here first. So if white were to go over here into what we perceive as the normal direction, we might not be as inclined to simply sacrifice these stones here, and instead we might go ahead and connect under, right? We might make the decision to connect under instead of playing on this outside, looking to sacrifice the stones here. It would make no sense. We're so strong and so thick. So we would be looking for something like that. Now, we do have some other options here on the board. We have the possibility of... I also just realized that I marked D, even though D is simply a 3-3. So we're going to change that to here. So this is not entirely bad either. You can technically do these things. So C and D are very similar. These are also big moves, but there's also no reason we shouldn't be attacking white's approach with a pincer. So these are acceptable answers, but they really play away from what I would consider the immediate attack, right? Even though we might not view this as an attack, but it is really obvious that white does not want to get pincered here. White does not want to get pincered because now we might get into slightly more awkward positions or irregular positions. So white might actually end up going for something more like this Joseki. But overall, these are also still acceptable. So if we play away as black, it might make a lot of sense for white to immediately go and play on this bottom of the board right away. So even though these aren't that big difference in points, it might be really important for us to basically... I don't want to say punish, because we're not really punishing white for white playing this. Like, this is an okay move for white. There's nothing wrong with white approaching this lower right corner. But more so to prevent white from punishing us, even if it is a small punishment. And I want to make people aware, because I know this is something that I mentioned to all of my students, is that when you are thinking about the idea of punishing something, a punishment does not mean you've punished them for 15, 20 points. Punishments can be 100 points. Punishments can be 50 points. Punishments can be 0.5s. So playing away gives white an opportunity to punish you, even though these punishments are very small. But they really do set the tone for the game, especially if you understand how important the opening of the game can be. But yeah. Let's go ahead and set up our second board position here. So we're going to go ahead and make sure I'm grabbing the right one, the correct tree here. So it looks like we are on green tree. All right. So we have another position here. We have our A, B, C, and D. And I do think I have them correct this time. I do have them correct. So I'm going to go ahead and pause for a moment. You can also take a moment to pause the video if you'd like. All right. If your answer was A, you got it correct. Now, I'm sure some of my stronger viewers are probably thinking this one is pretty obvious. And you would be correct that it is pretty obvious. However, I know some of my DDK viewers and some SDK viewers would appreciate that I go over this one. So just remember that we are looking at direction of play for all levels and not just our higher level players. So this is a Joseki. So we'll go ahead and kind of go back into what the position was. So we can see that this was a double approach, and it divulges into what we perceive as a Joseki. However, when you are playing this Joseki, you want to make sure that you have that you have the ladder, because if black has the ladder, then black would be pulling this stone out. But we can see it pretty much goes straight into the white stones here. So black will not play that right now, and instead, black would play here at c16. Now, the reason I mention this as really important, especially for my DDK and my SDK viewers, and in some cases even my 1 Dawn to 3 Dawn Fox viewers, is because something that a lot of players do is they try to break these ladders in really interesting or unique ways. In fact, I even have students, or a student, when they started coming to me, one of the ways that they would fix cutting points, instead of making a connection or instead of making a tiger's mouth, they would actually set themselves up where they would capture a ladder stone. So they would set it up to where they said, oh, if my opponent cuts me there, I have the ladder. And something that they didn't know was that if they did that, that would mean that the opponent could go and constantly create ladder threats and be like, hey, I'm gonna play this move, and that's gonna be a problem. So for example, if we were to play away here to B, black would actually play this move, and if we suddenly made this connection, black is going to pull this stone out, and we're not going to be too happy about it, right? And then we have to go, oh, well, I want to create I want to prevent that from happening. I've got to capture it. Well, now we're going to get pressed down really hard, and this is going to be an amazing result for black, because we are now just shoved down to the first line when we should have at least had a little bit of second line, and a little bit more room to grow. So we have to be able to understand that in my opinion, one of the greatest things that AI has actually taught us is we should just capture the ladder stone. If you look at tons of Joseikis that have ladders in them, the end result is to just simply take that ladder stone. It really is to just go, hey, I don't want to deal with this constant ladder breaker bull crap, so I'm just gonna take the ladder stone. I'm not gonna deal with it. I don't want anything. I don't want, this to plague me throughout the game. Now this would not fall into the category of alter options. Sure, there might be some 0.2s on the board, some 0.3. So for example, this is a move that could be a 0.3, because it says, hey, your opponent can no longer break your ladder like this, but that doesn't prevent them from playing a move like this and forcing us to connect. Now, obviously, this is not the best way that black can cause us to capture the ladder stone. Ideally, you want to look at your opponent's group and play moves that are going to be really forcing. So, for example, we would see a move like this from black. Normally, we may not see a move like this from black. This would be really strange. But black is saying, hey, I want to be very forcing to this group, because white is not going to be able to react normally. If white reacts to something like this and we get into this position, suddenly we take this stone and now black has the ladder. And we've gone into shambles again. So we have to be incredibly careful. And if we have to sit here and babysit our stones every step of the way, that's going to be a problem. Not only is it going to be a headache, something we constantly have to think about, it's like watching over your shoulder the whole step of the way. So it's really good to be able to just simply capture these stones. So while we could, theoretically play some 0.2s and 0.3s, these are generally not the way you want to. These are generally not acceptable to me. These are, again, 0.2s and 0.3s that I would consider very unacceptable. These would be moves that are telling me that we have bad habits as players if we were to do this kind of thing. Now, there are instances where you could do that, but this is definitely not going to be one of them. So that means that all of these other moves, while some of them are simply surely acceptable, like we could approach this right corner if we didn't have to worry about this ladder, it's actually an acceptable move. And if we were to play down here, sure, it's also an acceptable move. These are perfectly fine moves. But because of the ladder, we're generally not going to be going to these moves. Now, the only move that I would consider unacceptable is to play in the upper left corner. And if you saw the very first quiz on this video, you will know that we are approaching a strong living corner, which means that it's very easy for black now to decide that they're going to go for a variation that might split or pincer this white stone. And this would be very bad for white. White does not want to have to do this. Now, of course, black isn't going to do that kind of thing instantly, because black is more interested in causing us to capture, like forcing us to capture the singular stone, right? So it's more likely that black is going to go for something like this. But if we already did that and white were to play this top side, black would definitely be looking for something like this. So it is more reasonable for white to consider a move like here, but more so a move like this, or just approaching the upper right. But let's go ahead and move on to the next branch. So we are on the light blue branch here. So let me go ahead and get this up. All right, so this is going to be our white to play. And you guys will notice that it is a very similar to same position as the last game. We have our A, B, C, and D. I'm going to go ahead and pause myself for a moment, and I'll let you guys pause the video and give you a moment to think. All right. If you said the answer is A, congratulations. You made a very good judgment. So, it is absolutely normal for us to capture the stone. And while this is a completely viable move in this game, it is only about -1 point to capture, which may sound like a lot to a lot of our strong players that are watching, and a move that might be really bad in my own game. But technically, I would not blame you for playing this. However, this is one of those rare occasions. I did sneak this in there. I did choose this problem intentionally afterwards, because I have now convinced you that you should do this almost every time. And you would be right. You should almost do this every time. But we are so strong across the other side of the board that it is very difficult for black to create a co-threat that matters. So if we were to play, for example, over here to C, and black said, oh my gosh, they left themselves open with this ladder, I better create some kind of ladder breaker. How do you do that? How do you do that? That's really hard on this group. It is not easy to create a move over here that breaks this ladder. This is an instance where we are so thick on the other side of the board that we don't care if white tries to create a ladder breaker, because we're just not going to be threatened by it. Now, obviously, we know C is not correct. This is an instance where I would say most of these answers are actually okay. However, A is the best one, so you could play here. I would say that this is kind of the wrong direction. Generally, this is not the most open side of the board, and if we were to simply take this stone, this right side would be kind of irrelevant. We're not really aiming for that right side of the board. So I would definitely say D is the slowest move that we could possibly do here, especially when we have B as a possible move. And C is okay because we are going to the open side of the board. We are going to a nice open side. Technically, we could also maybe approach on the bottom, maybe even play in the corner. These moves are acceptable, but not as good as A. A is very important because we can see that white is actually building something really nice up here. If white hanes, black would hane back, and white can get this double hane. And while black could technically make this decision to trade, this would be way too amazing for white. This corner would just be really terrible. It would not be a happy position to be in. So what would end up happening is black would have to connect, in which case white would take the outside, and then black doesn't want to play away because this move is just simply too large. It might look like endgame to a lot of people, but the higher you get, the more you appreciate not getting squeezed in a corner and ending in gote. If my opponent is going to get a move like b17 and I have to protect my group here and protect again and just be like, okay, I will live small and my opponent got all these free endgame points, I will not let that happen. I would rather bite the bullet and just make sure that my corner is nice and big. Now, of course, this is not a good variation for black. Black does not want this to happen, but they should have thought about that before playing away here. This is a bad move by black. Black should continue to extend out here. We do not want to get squeezed at the top of the board. We do not want this to happen. But all right, if you have gotten all of the answers up to this point, you're doing a good job. We've got one more to go. We've got one more problem. We are now on the orange variation. So let me go ahead and go to the orange variation here on OGS. All right, we've got an interesting one here. So we got our A, and we're playing white here. So we have A, B, C, and D. I'm going to go ahead and pause myself and give you guys a couple seconds to think. Go ahead and pause the video if you'd like. All right. If you said B, you got it correct. So for me, this one is just a lot about wrong or incorrect direction. So for example, let's go back to actually start with C. Why is C wrong? Well, if you've been paying attention to the video up to this point, we know C is incorrect because we are approaching a strong living corner. And when we approach a strong living corner, it's very easy for our opponent to pincer us and say, I am safe in the corner. I'm just going to pincer you and say my stone can live independently of you. Now, of course, that's not probably exactly how we would do that. We would probably more so submarine around the corner. But generally, the idea is white is playing too close to thickness. They have to be careful. So that would mean that this move here is not correct. Now, something that people often do is they take bases off of their large walls. This is not always incorrect, and this move isn't particularly super bad. It's, you know, it's still a playable move, but something that I recommend people try to do instead of just simply taking territory in a very inefficient way, try to be a little bit more proactive about it. So something that I like to do in my own games is I say, I'm not going to take I'm not going to forcibly take territory. I'm not going to set my own boundaries. I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to expand myself. And if you do make this invasion, I'm going to trade smart. I accept that you will get this base attack towards these white zone corners. And in exchange, I got my expansion. Or maybe black plays more like this, and I choose to take this side. Sure, you know, black's going to get to, again, take a small base attack towards this wall, but in exchange, I took a more solid point base. A problem with this type of move is that we're not actually obtaining the territory between here or between here. It's not exactly very difficult for black to just throw a stone in here. It's not very difficult for black to just reduce the area between here. So we're basically trying to say that we're obtaining this whole right side in one move. And I know people might be like, no, I'm expecting to get that in multiple moves. What other move are you going to play? Are you planning to play this? This looks incredibly over-concentrated. We've got a lot of stones over there on that right side. Something that I tell my students all the time is sometimes you need to be able to go, I don't have a good move on the right side, so I want my opponent to help me find that good move. So sometimes letting your opponent make that invasion is going to help you come to an answer. So sure, we may not get the whole right side, But when we respond to our opponent's invasion and they take a base like this, we 100% are taking this as territory. Sure, maybe it's a little bit reducible, maybe a little bit invadable, but not as heavily as it was before. It's not going to be bad for us to expand on this corner, basically. So we don't always want to put ourselves in a position where we're trying to take this massive side of the board in one singular move and then have no follow-ups that are good. So we build big but trade smart, and this is something I'm really good at. It's one of my favorite things to do. I just love doing it. It's something I do and try to do in all my games, and hopefully I will be able to show you guys games like that in the future. And I know that some people are probably like, Paige, that's also Joseki. Yes, it is also Joseki, and yeah, I think because it's Joseki, it makes it slightly obvious. But sometimes it's good to understand why we might be in this situation and not just simply playing it because it's Joseki. And now, why is A wrong? So A is very similar to B. However, we are expanding the wrong side. The difference is that when we are playing B over here, we are playing for influence. We are playing for strength. But when we are playing A over here, we have a similar idea, but it's incorrect on the wrong side. We have territory over here. We are working for territory on this side of the board. And we're adding influence on top of our territory. It just isn't very good. We're expanding something that is already... Now, I know a lot of people are probably going to be like, but Paige, your opponent can play this move. Yeah, well, this move doesn't prevent that, okay? Technically, there's not really any move that you can play to expand in this direction that is going to prevent your opponent from jumping in here. And so when we're thinking about where is it important to expand at, it's going to be on this right side. This is how we would play for influence on the right. And then when our opponent tries to invade, we would just say, okay, we're not going to kill that stone, but we are going to... trade smart, making sure that we are making smart trades. But yeah, all right, we'll go ahead and end the direction of play video here. I hope you guys really enjoyed this type of video. I would really like to I know I probably didn't do this perfectly. I'm sure there's probably much better ways that I could have done this. But this was kind of the way that I thought of, and I hope it was still good. I hope it was good enough for you guys. But if it's not and you guys think it could be better, feel free to leave a comment. In fact, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comment section as well. Maybe moves that I didn't think of, or maybe moves I just didn't come up with, or maybe you just want to share your answers or your thoughts with other viewers. But nonetheless, if you enjoyed this video, I hope to make more of these in the future. Please feel free to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and also, if you are interested in lessons, I do study groups like this every other Saturday almost. And if that's something you like and want to participate in, feel free to take a look at my Patreon in the description of the video. And I will see you all in the next video.